Oh, it's still 41 seconds.
Can you
Okay.
check? Can you see this on YouTube? Okay.
Oh man, I know.
And you can hear us when we're chatting? All right, here we go. We got 14 seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the conversation. My name is Vaughan. I am the creator and host of We Create Music TV. And tonight we have an amazing conversation for you. We have three guys who are experts in the field of sync licensing and getting their music into TV and film. Tonight's going to be full of gems. It's going to be full of information that you're going to want to make sure you write down and you take copious notes, because I'm telling you, tonight is going to be an amazing event. So once again, welcome to the conversation. My name is Vaughan. I won't hold us up any longer. We're going to jump right into it. So I want to welcome my guests, Clint, Nelson, and Dre Phantom.
What's up?
What's up, everybody? How y'all doing tonight?
How's everybody doing?
Gentlemen, of course, I've said this a million times. Thank you very much just for being here. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge tonight. And I'm sure that our audience members are going to get a ton of gems tonight. So thank you once again. And so I'll give you a moment, each of you, to introduce yourself, talk about who you are, what you've done, and then we'll get into our questions. But also for our guests who are watching here online, it's just so you can kind of know the format that we're going to be engaged in. After they introduce themselves, we will jump right into our conversation. I have a ton of questions that I want to ask them, but I'm going to pose them tonight. So we'll kind of chit chat for about 55 minutes around there. And then we'll open it up for the last 30 minutes for your questions. So when you are in the chat and you are going to ask a question, please write question and then write your question. That way I can differentiate between, the chatter that's going on in the chat box and the actual question that you have for our panelists tonight. So without further ado, we'll have Clint start off, introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Cool. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here, and hopefully we can all share some information that'll help everybody watching. My name is Clint. I'm a music producer, entrepreneur. Been producing music for, I don't know, I started the company back in 2009. Been really heavy in music licensing for the past 5 years or so. So it just been blessed enough to produce music for networks such as MTV, CBS, NBC, VH1, BET, and a bunch of others. So yeah, just helping people kind of navigate the path of music licensing and getting their music placed in TV and film, and just kind of sharing my journey as well as I continue down my path and just try and take it to the next level.
All right. Excuse me. Nelson.
All right. How you doing, everybody? Again, as Clint said, thank you, Brian, for this amazing event. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Nelson, and I am a composer for film and TV specifically. I focus a lot on that. I've been producing music since about the early 2000s, and I got into licensing around 2013. And I started my company, 85 Productions LLC, and we've built from there, bringing in Super Sync Squad to where we license our music to film and TV, such as MTV, BET, VH1, Netflix, Nickelodeon, those type, like any show that you can think of. And we focus a lot more on, or I focus a lot more on teaching others the different strategies that I use to get my film and television.
All right, awesome. Dre?
Hey everybody, how's it going? Brian, thanks again for having me on board. Appreciate you, the invite and everything, and being along some talented fellas, some brothers
Mm-hmm.
as Nelson and Clint as well. Um, I'm a music producer and DJ for the most part. Started out my career as a DJ, but got into music production in about the early 2000s, and been really prominent with music licensing and since about last 5 6 years now. And just like the examples, of networks that the other brothers mentioned, been doing stuff with NBC, VH1, Vice International, and many more others. And
Mm-hmm.
just glad to be a part of this great conversation that we're about to have tonight, and sharing our journeys with everyone. So yeah, man.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for that amazing introduction. So we'll jump right into it. There's nothing like when you're kicking off an event, you're trying to make sure your throat is, ready, and then you almost, and then you almost choke on the, then you almost choke on the water that you're drinking, right? That's always a great thing. All right, so we'll just jump right into it. And so for all of us who are watching, so I want to kind of put all of us on a even kill, right? Level, even playing field. So can you just tell us, how does sync licensing actually work? Like, what is it and how does it actually work? So we'll start off with Clint.
Yeah, so I guess the basic definition of it is music being synced to picture, to film, to TV.
Mm,
Um, Permission is needed for a TV show or a movie or independent film or even a YouTube video. Permission is needed to put music to that. So what we do is, we exploit our music and we leverage that into income. You give them permission, and then in exchange, usually they'll give you either credit or royalties or upfront payment. So that's in a nutshell what music licensing is.
okay, awesome. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Nelson or Dre?
Yeah, he pretty much nailed it on the
Yeah, he
head.
hit it. Yep, for
Of
sure.
course,
Right,
of
right.
course.
Like, yeah, he got it.
Very
Awesome.
clear, precise definition of it for sure.
Right. Okay, so in consideration with that, so what are some of the types of sync licenses and deals that people should be aware of? So we'll go to Nelson.
All right. So the most common deals that you have non-exclusive deals and you have exclusive deals, which ultimately are what you're going to see most commonly. But you
Mm,
also have, when you start diving into working with production companies or maybe direct with supervisors, then you start getting into gratis agreements. So those are pretty much, you can have work for hire agreements also. So there's a couple there, a couple agreements there, but the most common that you're going to see, especially when you're starting to dig deep, or not dig deep, but when you're starting out, I would say you're
mm.
definitely going to do non-exclusive or exclusive deals,
Okay.
which are
Let me.
like the most popular.
Okay. Well, I mean, what are the difference between the two? Just in case there's
So,
somebody out there needs clarity.
so to make it a little more clear, non-exclusive ultimately, in a nutshell, means that when you license your music out to perhaps that library, if you wanted to go license it elsewhere, you have that opportunity to do so. Versus exclusively, when you license your music, you're licensing it exclusively to that party. So you
Mm,
can't go out and relicense the music or resell it. So in a nutshell, when it's exclusive, it's just for one party. Non-exclusives mean you have the freedom to do whatever it is you want to do with the music afterwards. So
okay. Okay. Anybody else want to jump in? And feel free to once one is done speaking, you can feel free to tag along on the answer if you want to do that.
Well, I'll add something to that. Nelson hit a great point on that, and sometimes with the agreements that are in place, depending upon if it's non-exclusive
Mm,
or exclusive or work for hire or gratis, or if you will, you can always have options where the terms are set to like maybe 6 months or a year or so or even longer, and you can navigate, your music elsewhere if you decide to. So, if you
mm,
see not much is getting, too much traction, or you just want to make moves or feel that there's a better home for that particular music or individual tracks, you can adjust, within terms and go from there.
Okay. So how does someone, when they are looking at licensing and they're talking, thinking about rates and negotiations and things like that, so how does one kind of, go through that process where they are really trying to negotiate and set their own pricing in terms of exclusive versus non-exclusive and who they should go with and who they should not go with? So anybody can take that one if you want to just jump in.
I'll take it. That's a good question, actually. I know me personally, when I started out, I kind of took the music library route, and there was no negotiation. Like, it was just, you sign the agreement. It's either non-exclusive or exclusive. No upfront money, and you just get royalties. And of course, you can't go negotiate with ASCAP or CSAC or BMI and be like,
Right.
These are the kind of royalties I want. You have to take whatever they give you according to their formulas or whatever. And then I think when you kind of get into like the syncs with, and Nelson may have some more experience with the Netflix stuff. Sometimes there could be room for negotiation, or in a film or like a song that's being featured or something like that, where there's upfront money involved, then you would probably get more into a negotiation type situation.
Okay.
Yep. And kind of like to piggyback on that again, especially when you're first starting out, as Clint mentioned, like whatever that agreement is with the library, that's what it's going to be. But the more you kind of, I would say, climb up the ladder and you start dealing direct, then you have those options to say, this is how much I want for this, or they might ask you your rates, but we can't really get it confused or like shoot yourself in the foot. You can't say like, oh, I want this big buku amount of money. You just have to, kind of like play it smart and kind of get a feel for it. But again, as you move through, you will find out that working direct again with like production companies and I would say like directors and producers especially, that's when you can start negotiating different prices because they're coming to you. We mentioned like a work for hire, so that's when you're able to kind of like negotiate those type of terms and prices, whether you get upfront money and royalties or you just opt in for the upfront money.
Okay. So which one is better? I mean, when you think about exclusive versus non-exclusive, which one is better?
Oh,
That's a good question.
Always love that question. Oh, go ahead, Dre.
Oh, I was just saying that's a good question right there.
Yeah, man, because I know you guys know too. Like that question comes up a lot, and I know all of us, we've probably experienced the non-exclusive and the exclusive deals. You know what I mean? So, in my own opinion, I like to hit everything from every different angle, just because it kind of gives you this leverage. You know what I mean? And you're able to put your music out in different realms, you know what I mean? But it's kind of hard to say which is better. I guess it just depends on how much work you want to do, because I always feel with an exclusive library, you have to create more music, you know what I mean? Because you create a set of music for the exclusive library. Now to make more music for someone else, you have to recreate more music, So if you're the kind of person who maybe wants to make one album or two albums a year, then maybe, exclusive might be good for you. But if you're like creating lots of music, maybe a non-exclusive might be good for you, but it's really going to depend on, I don't want to say that like ownership of your music, I guess, you know what I mean? So for me, I like them both, non-exclusive, but you guys can kind of elaborate if you guys have a favorite. But for me personally, I like to hit it from all angles,
Yeah, I think I know starting out I was trying to do all non-exclusives. I was like, man, I'm trying to get all these tracks in as many baskets as possible.
Yeah,
right.
But it started to change over the years. Like now, it seemed like a lot of people are. A lot of libraries are going more towards exclusive, just to kind of cut down on confusion. But yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like Nelson said, like either you trying to crank out a bunch of tracks or you trying to do minimum work. and get the most exposure from it. But yeah, I mean, I have a combination of both, some non-exclusive and some exclusive deals.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I would say the pretty much to piggyback on what Clint was saying. I like them both, to be honest, and I would say, just starting out, stay organized too, because
Oh,
if you get to a point where you're doing a lot of non-exclusive work, if you will, make sure that you know where that's going and who your relationships are with the non-exclusive work. And if you're doing exclusive, don't be afraid to, say, hey, build up your catalog so that one agency or one supervisor has a bulk of the work that's going that
Mm-hmm.
direction. And then, if you have another two or others, agreements in place for exclusives, if you will, create, more, and that way, you can have a good batch or a good catalog, if you will, of material that you can kind of disperse and distribute. And I feel that, with probability and options, some libraries or some supervisors may have other clients that they might be, directing or pitching to directly. So it leaves that room in space so that,
Mm.
opportunities can grow, because you might be able to land a placement with one exclusive library, but then another one you might be able to, land others, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it just gives you a range of options, and, hopefully, it could definitely build, your resume and your leverage for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So is there a music library that you guys would suggest? Let's say I'm just starting out in this whole sync licensing world. Is there one that you will say, hey, for somebody who's getting into it, here's one you should check out or kind of get into?
there's one that I kind of always suggest to people, and that's because I see that they have um, a lot of variety in the placements that they get.
Mm-hmm.
I see everybody's probably taking notes, but Pink Shark Music. So that's PinkSharkMusic. So Pink Shark Music is a pretty decent library, and I've noticed on a lot of shows that I watch, they've always had at least maybe like one or two, you know what I mean, and they focus on instrumentals as well as songs as well. So it's a pretty good combination from like
Mm.
sports, like all the way from like NBA sports cues to but it have like a selling sunset, so two kind of polar opposite type of shows. But Pink Shark is a good library, especially like when you're first coming out, you know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're not extremely huge, but then again they're not small. So you probably have a good chance of like getting in contact with someone.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, that was a question from one of our attendees. Is there something that's out there for people who just want to get into the game initially? So since we're already on the topic of library, so what are some of the pros and cons of using a music library? And anybody can take it. We'll start with Dre first.
I would say, really, to start up with pros and cons, just the terms. I mean, a lot of libraries out there, they have different agreements. So, you want to make sure that you're pretty much, um, agreeing and, adhering to the agreement for the most part, so that you're not doing anything, outside their terms, because you don't want to get on their bad side for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. But, uh, just keeping the relationship going and doing things, that's within agreements. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not too sure, stay in contact with your direct contacts that are there. But that's a good, place to start with, that I would say.
Okay.
Absolutely. And to oh, sorry, go ahead, Clint.
No, no, you can go.
Oh, I was going to add again some of the pros and cons. The One of a pro that I always like to mention is, again, it's all about the workload. So the library, they'll pretty much handle a lot of stuff for you, from registering the songs, then they're going to pitch the songs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to be in contact with people. So that's a little less that you have to do. So I think that's definitely a pro, especially when you're like starting out, because all you have to do is focus on making the music. You make the music, they'll handle all of the heavy lifting and stuff like that. One con that I do have for music libraries, and not
Mm-hmm.
to have anyone stray away from those or from the library, is just that, like Dre mentioned, the terms. You can give a library the terms to your music and a portion of your copyright, whatever they have in their terms, and for whatever reason, let's say you meet a music supervisor who really likes the song, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
now you have to go to the library and get it, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of us doing this, and the library has a lot of people, some of them, and they're like super huge. So it's just one con is that you're actually giving, others a piece of your music, I guess you would say, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but kind of like a little restriction sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think another con would be the fact that you don't control the relationship of who's placing your music.
Good
Um,
one.
Mm-hmm.
Good
That's
one.
great.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if so say for example, Black Ink Crew used a bunch of our music. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's gotten placed before they like it, but say something happens with the library and the relationship between the supervisor for Black Ink Crew and the library falls out, you lose it immediately, you know what I mean? And then you
That's
have to, you know what I mean? You have to try and kind of find a way to kind of get that relationship back directly if you can,
Mm.
because
It's
that's
almost like a
that's a
divorce.
challenge. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I really like that. I really like that. I never
Mm-hmm.
thought of that actually, but
yeah.
yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah. So in that same vein that you're speaking about, how do you develop effective relationships with music libraries and music supervisors and things like that? What's the best approach to building those relationships?
You stalk them.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, I mean, no, like a little bit. You stalk them a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's tough, man. Like, it's tough because they already have those relationships in place, and I think that's why we mention music libraries for people starting out a lot because you kind of want to get your chops up. You kind of want to get experience on how things work because if you're approaching a music supervisor, I mean they're super busy, so they don't really have time to like teach you the game. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I always show people. I mean, you can look at the credits on shows and movies,
Mm.
and it'll show you who the music supervisor is, and then from there, if you want to look them up on LinkedIn or Google or see what company they work for, and try and reach out that way. Sometimes they may work for like a music licensing company or something, and you can just kind of get in that way. So that's just a couple ways that I know of.
Mm.
Yeah, kind of other ways you can build relationships, kind of like Clint said, and seriously like stalking them, meaning kind of learn what their process is and research them and understand what they're doing because as he mentioned, they are busy,
Mm-hmm.
and if you go into the situation where you have a chance to meet a supervisor and you get into that situation and you don't understand the terminology or you don't understand what's in a contract or music rights or anything like that, then you might miss out on an opportunity because things are like quick. So you might get an agreement and you're like, I don't know what this means. Let me figure this out. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So those type of things are really kind of hinder building our relationships, but definitely being authentic is what I always say. Just be yourself, be authentic, because by the time, especially on social media, by the time you reach out to a music supervisor, say on Instagram or Twitter, they've already came to your profile. They looked at what you're about, like who is this guy contacting me. They done probably did their own research on you. So it's like don't waste their time. Like, oh hey,
Mm.
how's the weather today? It's like
They
they
don't
know
want,
they
they don't want to
yeah
talk about that.
right. They know, they're like, okay,
Like,
you're a musician, you're reaching out to me, tell me what you want,
Right.
and I've met people who are very, like concise in that manner, just
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, really short sentences. And I know they're not trying to be rude, but the sentence is short, sweet. What do you need? How can I help you? So definitely to be authentic in yourself and kind of get down to it, I always say.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what Clint and Nelson were saying, you know, for me, even starting out, I did a lot of research, you know, 6 months to a year almost,
Mm-hmm.
and just watching a lot of film, a lot of TV, live TV, going through the credits, looking at contacts that were direct, you know, assigned to these particular shows and networks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even a good tip too, if you have the opportunity, I know now, you know, with the advisory and everything due to COVID, there's not too many, you know, outgoing, you know, seminars or conventions. Those are really good. So hopefully when things get better, you know, even on the virtual tip, you know, if there's any
Mm-hmm.
seminars that are out there, I know BeatStars had one a couple weeks ago with a bunch of music supervisors out there. You know, feel free to kind of chime in and even just explore, because those contacts can actually lead to something later on in the future, especially if you're trying to build your resume and build your profile, and
Yeah.
just really shaking hands with folks, you know, rubbing elbows, because you got to do it at some point, you know, and it helps, you know, dictate the relationship in the future for sure.
Yeah. That she told me was the what makes it easy for music supervisors to work with someone is in is in what a person being like a one-stop shop that they can go
Mm-hmm.
to, and that it's easy for them to work with. There's no hassles, there's no delays, the communication is easy, the work process is easy. So I mean, I know I'm not a sync, you know, that's not what I do, but that was one piece of advice that I heard was make it easy for the music supervisors to work with you. You know, make
Yep.
sure that you're getting back in your communication. Make sure if they're sending you an email, you email them back within, you know, a certain amount of time. You know, don't kind of blow them off or brush them off, but ensure that you are staying communicative and responsive. So,
Yep. And like
yeah.
quickly to piggyback on Dre, definitely like research and more like
Mm,
research in terms of like who they are, but research what the business is about and like how it works. And again, going back to again like terminology and different contracts and
hmm.
stuff, because the more you know, the more that'll help you when you do get in contact with someone. And that's
Yeah.
very, very, very important because a lot of people, I made a post and I said one stop. Some like a lot of people don't know what one stop actually means.
Hmm.
So when they ask, a supervisor asks you, is your music one stop? And then you can't respond back to her email right away. You have to go Google a term or anything like that. So definitely researching and being knowledgeable of how it actually works, even on the basic side, will
Mm.
definitely be helpful too.
So can we let's take a moment and talk about some of that terminology
Yeah.
for the people who are watching who may not be familiar with it. I know Nelson, you posted up something the other day,
Oh, that
and I had to
one.
make sure
Like,
I had
yes.
to make sure I remember because I had heard
Mhm.
about most you talk about it
Yeah.
because
Well, it
you
was
know exactly
mostly
what it is. Yeah, most
so it
favored
was
nation.
one of the terms that you might find in agreements is MFN, which means most favored nations.
Hmm.
And ultimately, in a nutshell, what that means is I always like to explain it in a way. You have the master, then you have the composition. So you have the two sides of the song, right?
Hmm.
If typically the label might own the master, then the publishers have the other side. So if they want to sync the song to a film, they might approach the label and say, "We'll give you $1,000 to
Mm.
use this song in our film," right? But they might go to the little guys and say, "We'll give you 500," right? But MFN, that that clause kind of allows, it basically means that whatever you give for something similar, you have to give equal to the other party, basically.
Hmm.
So it's a little tricky because again, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. You know what I mean? You don't want to go and say, well, you got a track like this from Clint,
Hmm.
for $1,000, but you're trying to give me 500. I want $1,000 too. It might work, but they might say, too bad, and they might move on to the next person. You know what I mean? Or
Mm.
if you have MFN, I mean, they might honor it. You know what I mean? But you just have to pick and choose your battles. But in a nutshell, it just means that what one side is given, the other side is um, allowed to get that as well. So you'll always see. I had a friend of mine. He got a song picked up on Netflix, and they get, I think it was what was it, 2,500? I don't know the math, or I'll say 3,000, whatever. So 1,500 from one side, 1,500 for the other side. And that's because of the most favored nations clause. So I
Mm-hmm.
really like that. It's like very very interesting, and you might see it pop up. It might be hidden in there somewhere, but that's as you go up and start getting more into publishing and stuff like that. You probably won't see it when you go into like with a library agreement or something like that. But very very interesting term. I'd like to say.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So thank you. So what are some other terms that you feel that other people need to be knowledgeable of when they're getting into this space? I'll leave that open for the rest for the group.
Oh,
Some popular ones.
I look. I know that wasn't the question that I had for y'all, but
well,
it came up, so I
terminology
kind
is
of want to talk about
important.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I guess I don't know, man. I guess talking about the structure,
Ah,
sting is
yep.
a term everybody should know, especially if you're doing instrumental cues. And what a sting ending, if they're asking for that, it's just how you end your track. It's not a fade out. It's literally just like you end on the one, you end on like a note that resolves the track, and then you just kind of let it sting out. um so that's a term
Mm,
that you'll hear a lot on the composition side of things.
okay.
So
And then one that you mentioned, one stop could be said a little bit, but one stop ultimately means that they don't have to go anywhere else to get clearance for the
Mm-hmm.
music. That they can just come to me and they can say, well, who owns the master, who owns the publishing, who, you know, do you have the rights to sign off on the song? So that
Mm,
makes it a lot faster when it's one stop. So ultimately, when you sign a library agreement, that library already has an agreement. It's already known that the library is ultimately a one stop because they can get any music they want, boom, and they don't have to talk to anybody about that. So that's what one stop. That's very very important to know. So if your music is one stop, you own it, everything, and it's all clear. You kind of have a good chance at keeping up with the
mm-hmm.
supervisors. I would say.
Yeah, because they're bringing my words right. They are always
Almost.
going to want to come back to you
Yep.
because you're making it very easy for them to do business with.
Hmm.
And that way they know that, okay, when I go to, one of you, that it's clearable, it's communicative, and they're very responsive. And so they know if they deal with anybody else and they run into maybe some issues or some hassles, you know, Dre and Nelson and Clint never give me issues. I'm
Hmm.
going to go
And
back
that,
to them.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
that's
No.
extremely important. You always want to have that. And there was one more really quick where I'm trying to pull it up here because I had it like a little note. But one is
Mm,
called linear use, and it basically says when the music being licensed in a specific manner without manipulation, right? So a lot of libraries will ask for stems sometimes, and that's because their end users like to manipulate the track. You know what I mean? So they might like to move the hook or move the drums around and things like that. So
mm,
linear use, that's a good term because sometimes you don't want your music to be manipulated. You made
mm,
it how you made it. The hook is where you want it to be, all of those things. That's how you made it. And then let's say it shows up in a movie, you'll be stoked. But what if they, you know, move the hook to the verse part? You know what I mean? So
right.
those are things that you have to look out to. It's a minor, and I mean I would be happy to have it in a movie. I probably won't complain much, but that's just a term. If you ever come across that, it just means that the music will be used and they won't manipulate it at all. But
Mm,
you give most libraries the permission to do that most of the time.
Yeah, and just to give some feedback too while we're on talking about structure and good terms with that. Even the word or the term bumper
Oh yeah.
narratives,
mhm.
you've got to know the alternative, versions or for your deliverables because these editors or supervisors may come back to you and say, hey, can you clean up the bumper or the sting version, or can you make some changes to it? So usually your bumper is like a 15-second format of the track that you're auditioning or you had submitted. A narrative version of the track is just usually the full track, but it's an alternative way, and it usually doesn't have the main chorus or main medley, so it's just an alternate. You just take that out and clean it up, and for the most part, that's your narrative version. Because a lot of shows, they may not use your main or your sting versions, or your bumpers or your 30 or 60-second format, but they may use the narrative because it just has a different feel. But it has that it maintains the feel, but it feels a little different because it's just missing that little piece of that main melody that was in the chorus of the hook.
Yeah, those are some great terms. So Nelson, can you do me a favor? Because
absolutely.
The term that you had mentioned before, what you were speaking on, somebody was asking, could you repeat what that term is again?
Which one we had? Or linear use, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it was linear use.
Okay,
I think that's what it was.
So it says a linear use is when the music being licensed is being used in a specific manner without manipulation, which includes moving verses around or taking out a horn section and things like that. So in a nutshell, if I create a song, right, and it has vocals and everything, so I create a song and I have the intro, my hook, the bridge, and the verse, that's how I created the song, right? So the linear use, that's the linear use because nothing is changing in that song, right? But most of the time we give the libraries permission to alter the song and do whatever they want to do to it, because that's just the nature of how TV and film works, you know what I mean? It might not, the hook might not need to be right here, or the directors or showrunners might have like, we want the hook to come in right exactly without the horns. You're just giving them the permission to change things around. So the linear use is just saying, hey, you won't change this, it will stay this way how we made it.
Perfect. Okay, so so since we're on the topic of structures of songs, right? I think Dre, you brought it up. So let's talk about that. So creating music for an artist, creating music, even instrumental albums, etc., is different than creating music for TV and film. So can you guys talk about your approach to structuring music, your concept of structuring music, and then what are the different types that, Dre, I know you started mentioning that, but so what are some of the different types that people need to be aware of when they're creating and structuring music for sync licensing? Open, anybody can take it.
So structure is probably, man, like the most important part. So what I do is I kind of follow the same formula for my instrumental cues, where the intro is really, really short, like no more than like 12 to 14 seconds. That's the most. Most times it's shorter than that. And then I'll start off with a verse that gradually builds up, and then I'll go into like the main idea or the chorus or the hook, whatever you want to call it. And then I'll do like a second verse, and I may switch some things out, take some drums out, take some sounds out or whatever, build back up to that hook again, and then I throw the sting ending at the end, depending on where I'm at time-wise, and I stay around that, that minute and a half mark. Sometimes I'll go up to 2 minutes, and I use it. Sometimes I may start with the hook first, but for the most part, that's kind of like my structure. And then I'm the type where if something works, then I just stick with it. You know what I mean? I don't really change it too much. Full songs is gonna be a little bit different. You'll submit the whole song. I'm usually careful on still trying not to have long fade outs or fade outs at all, because in most cases they usually use the hook of a song anyway, and then they figure out what they want to do with it after that. But yeah, as far as instrumentals, that's the structure I usually roll with.
All right. Nelson?
And likewise, that's the same as Clint, like the same structure. And I like to explain it. You think of it like stairs, you know what I mean? So you kind of build it up and you get all the way to that climax because the structure is important because you don't want to kind of compete with the dialogue that's going to be there, so you kind of I always like to approach it in thinking that even though I can't see the
Mm-hmm.
what's happening on screen because it might get placed anywhere, but I always keep in mind that maybe I want this particular cue to take them into a commercial. You know what I mean? So then I kind of build it up gradually and let it explode at the end, or you know what I mean? So it all kind of plays a difference. And Dre mentioned like bumpers and narratives and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, Again, you have bumper, narrative, and your main version. Like that's three opportunities for you to get a placement, because they might use your bumper at the end, they might use your narrative version somewhere in the middle, just because they like the
Mm.
flavor of the track. So having different versions of a well structured track, always, always, always do that and give them options, because that's ultimately what those different versions um, are for. You want to give
Mm-hmm.
them options and you want to structure it so that you're not um, competing with the dialogue again that's there, I think.
Yeah, and also, likewise, my format's very similar to you guys as well. Usually, when I start out with an idea, I just build upon the idea, and if I can see it going somewhere, I want to stick with, my original idea with the track. I'll add different things to it. Of course, we know the structure of your waveform, and you want to differentiate it and make it unique and all that stuff. But you never want to rush your idea or getting a complete track. Oh yeah, I got the track complete. But while you're in it and enjoying the moment, take a look at different things. If you have like your standard 8 bars or 16 bars, see what you can add into it so that when you're actually arranging your song or your cue, if you will, you know that when we're making those alternate versions, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you down the road when you're actually finalizing your track and getting down to your mix. So, I always make that recommendation too because what stands out plays a big part too at the ending, when you're getting the tracks approved and the cues, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
approved and everything. So, just enjoy your composition while you are at it, and seeing how it goes, and just flow with it, and then start from here and take it all the way up and bring it back down so that it has that mood to it, and it kind of helps the editors in the long run with pitching your music, so.
Yeah, and in terms of editors, one thing like when you're structuring the track, keep in mind maybe to create miniature cues within that complete track. Because you have a whole track that's 2.5 minutes long. You know, if you build a few 30-second sections that can stand on their own, then that's going to open up more doors for you to get again multiple placements from one track. So I've used that method from time to time. I just kind of build many 30-second tracks. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So something might have all of the elements, and then something might have, less, like Dre mentioned, a narrative version. And you play that out through your whole entire track. Make the end a bumper, then make the middle the narrative version. And
Mm-hmm.
one hint, if y'all structuring the tracks, if there's a way, kind of add a sting. Clint kind of gave a description of that, but kind of add a sting after those sections because that'll also help editors, like they're able to cut a little more precisely. You know what I mean? And it won't sound a little awkward when they cut it. And if you notice when you listen to especially reality TV, you will hear a lot of times where exactly it is that they edit and then try to loop the
Mm-hmm.
the track back. You know what I mean? You can kind of tell. So in a way, like I started doing that. I started having like a little pause, maybe like 1 or 2 second, and then boom, bring in the next part of the track. So I have one track, but it has four miniature cues in that track. Then on top of my narrative version and my drum and bass version, then it just kind of gives you a lot of opportunities off of, one track. I like to think
Mm-hmm.
in terms
So
of
in
structure.
yeah.
That's dope. Yeah, and Nelson mentioned he was just like you create more opportunities because whether they use your full track or your drum and bass version, you're still gonna get paid the same amount
Yeah.
of money
Yeah,
I
every
see.
same,
month.
So
yeah,
yeah.
So
So
same
then,
difference.
so make it, man, to get everything you can out of that one track and create as
Everything.
many
Yep.
opportunities because
hmm
man, like it's gonna pay the same.
so let me ask you this. So when you guys are structuring your music, do you kind of structure your music with sync in mind? Like, okay, I know this is going to be I'm creating this song just for sync, or do you just make the beat yourself and then say, this is for an artist, and then I'll just go back and tweak it a little bit later? I mean, so do you sit down and actually say, this is a sync beat, this is a beat for an artist?
I do personally. Yeah, I separate it because I approach it differently, just completely
Mm,
differently.
Yeah, for
yeah.
me, it's just become habit, I would say. So
Mm,
for the longest, it's just even on full songs. I mean, we did a full song, but a sting ending found its way there, and it wasn't something that was on purpose. It's just kind of like muscle memory, I guess. You finish
mm,
your track, I'm like, oh, boom, I got the sting on there. Not necessarily I didn't need it, but I kind of approach it in a way. It's just like by habit. I don't. If I'm definitely building for a rapper or a singer or something, then of course we know. But for the most part, for me, it just kind of it's kind of habit of how I build the tracks now.
Yeah, I
okay.
would say the same for me as well too. Just based on where the inspiration carries you from the get go, from jump. But I would say as a trick too, a lot of times I've in full track length mode, like I'll create a beat or instrumental that's like a standard song length, but then I'll think to myself, maybe a day or two goes past and I'm like, you know what, this can really fit, for some cues or for some sync stuff. So this is where you really got to do your math and adjust it. And a lot of times I've done that just based on artists not really feeling it, or looking to something else. I'm like, you know what, I'll take this track right here, do my due
Yep.
diligence, you know what I mean,
Right.
and just
Make it
adjust
work
the
for
track
you.
length
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And instead of having it the full length size, I'll just cut it in half or even more and just do my adjustments and everything. And really it makes it a little bit easier on you when you kind of adjust it and look at it from that way, because you already have all your material and all your your backgrounds and everything else, all the elements, if you will, that you can use. And just go from there and just make sure that you've got your structure on point, and the flow of the track and your sting endings, and you're good to go.
hmm Yeah, so excellent, excellent advice. Okay, so I heard a phrase used several times already. Cue, right? So is that the same as a sync? What is a cue? Are there any differences between a sync and a cue?
It's a good. Do you want to take it,
Oh,
Nelson?
Whoever want
you
to
go
take
ahead.
it.
You guys could
I was.
take.
I mean, a cue can be synced. So when we say cue, um, at least I know when we say cue, it's like a piece of instrumental music specifically made for TV. It's playing in the background. It's not like a full song. It's just like we said, like the structure that we did. It's specifically made for TV. And when they're syncing things, they just put it. If it's 15 seconds of some instrumental music behind somebody speaking or whatever. So we just call those cues. And
Okay.
then when they process it and they send everything to BMI, they create like what's called cue sheets.
Yeah.
So it's saying like this piece of music was played at this time. This is who owns it. This is the kind of usage it was and things like that. So that's what we mean when we say cue.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we kind of clarified what that was. And so I'll stay on structure here for just a moment. So when you are making music for sync, is there a type of feel or type of mood that you always try to go for, or are you watching a movie and saying, you know what, I want to make a song or yeah, pretty much a song that kind of fits that particular genre. I mean, do you kind of think about those types of things, or how do you
Yeah,
approach it with your?
I approach it. I think my a lot of my inspiration kind of comes from watching TV or watching a specific show, because I'll sit there and I'll watch it and I'm like, oh, I really like this show. One of my first shows was a show on MTV. So I really like, oh, I would really like to get music on that show. So then for a while, that's just the type of music I was trying to make. The show was The Challenge, so I was trying to make that type of music like for a while. So for me personally, it kind of comes from whatever my target is at that moment. So I go in and I say, I want to. I think Clint mentioned Black Ink Crew. I'm like, oh, I want to do Black Ink Crew, or I want to get something on here. So I kind of go into it with whatever my target is, because then I kind of have to study that show or something like that, just so I can get a feel for it. Otherwise, I'm creating, and I believe anything can be used. Like whatever you can create, like
Sure.
you can create a country pop funk track. You know what I mean? And somebody out there is going to use it. At one point, right? But I go in personally by I'll watch a show and I'll grab inspiration from that show a lot, and then start to create my tracks.
Okay. Anyone else?
I kind of approach it the same way, just kind of
Okay.
intentional. Sometimes now I just work off cues, and then just knowing what's hot and current right now, because a lot of times they want stuff that sounds like that. But yeah, I try and be intentional. If it's a specific show and I know they use a specific type of music, I'll kind of approach it that way. And yeah, like I know one time I sat down, created a boatload of tracks just for sports. It didn't land on no sports shows. Like it was all everything else outside of sports. So you never know where to end up, but at least
Yeah.
I was locked in too. I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna be all over NFL Network. But yeah, sometimes you just never know where it ends up.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to kind of derail a little bit, a similar situation. It was intended for The Challenge, and it's like an EDM type track. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, it's gonna be definitely for this, and it ended up on like Love and Hip Hop. So it was just like, oh, I would have never thought they would have used that, because the track is like completely opposite. So again, you can, like you say, you can go in creating something, and anything can be used anywhere. You just will never know. So that's crazy that happened. Nice little story.
Yeah, I could relate to both Clint and Nelson as well on that. A lot of times it's it's very direct or intentional, based on what's trending or what's current, and a lot of times based on my personal vibe or mood at the time, how I'm feeling. I might want to do a hip hop track, or I may want to do something more of a with the R&B flavor to it, or and just based on and especially too, if you have an assignment, you want to stick to the guidelines of that.
Yeah.
And that's more direct. So if they're looking for something more hip hop or trap or something like that, stick to that. But if I always have a part where I'm creating, I call it free play if I have the moment, and I just go with the flow, whatever I'm feeling at the time, and just go from there. There was a point where a little while back recently, I was, making something that I knew was for sports or something, that was kind of intense. But then, I was going with it, and then, I had it out there for a little while, and it ended up on a love and hip hop scene where the scene was like very dramatic, like a fight was about to break out. So I was like, okay, it works, but that's the whole thing where you never know where it's going to end up, and there's just that realm of opportunity right there. So
Yeah, loving hip hop using everything.
I see.
It's like, you don't want to use it, we'll take it.
We'll use it.
Yeah.
Like we will. So since we've been talking about structuring song and creating music for the purpose of sync licensing, so what is your advice on utilizing samples in the creation of music for sync licensing purposes? And
Amazing.
so yeah, so we'll start with Nelson, and then we'll have Clint and Dre kind of add to that.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested. For me, I learned early on not to use samples. I definitely like not samples of old records like Aretha Franklin, things like that, but samples like that you find in sample packs or that you find like on these loop websites and things like that. Mainly for me because if I use the loop and Clint uses the loop and Dre uses the loop, you know what I mean? Let's say we start our track that way. They have different pro or different software that kind of scans your music. You know what I mean? So if all three of our tracks get scanned and our libraries are tracking them, they're like, hey, that's my song. No, that's my song. It can cause confusion, right? However, I'm not completely opposed to using loops because you do have a chance to manipulate those loops. And a lot of time, the issue is that people use the loop and they let it stand alone. So when you let
Yep.
it stand alone, that's going to cause your problem. Because you have to create narrative versions or you have to create these different versions of your song. So if I use a loop and then they want a track with just the main melody and I use the piano loop, then I'm going to be in a little bit of trouble, and that can cause
Mm-hmm.
bad blood between
Yep.
you and your library or your publisher. So what I tell someone to stay away from using loops, I would say be creative with the loops. Don't just use a loop. Be creative, definitely.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
what Nelson said.
Yeah, I
yeah.
would say
So
the same thing. Same
yeah,
thing as
yeah.
well. I mean, because you don't want, some of that bad traction to happen out there, and a lot of these supervisors and libraries and agencies in place, they have caught on, to a point where like a lot of these platforms are available for producers and creators, and they're just simply saying like, hey, the less the better, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of lawsuits that have been coming out with it and saying like, hey, this was royalty free, or but then this creator that created the loop or the sample based pack, deserves credit and things that, so
Right.
you just want to avoid the red flags and the red tape that could be produced, along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I asked it. Yeah, I thank you for that. That's why I asked the question because I know that sometimes, from what I've heard, it's frowned upon when you are utilizing a loop. And I don't know if they're asking this question up front, if the information is being scanned by the software that you mentioned previously. But I think the advice is just be very careful with using loops from like the loop packs. So I don't know about like TrackLib, so when you get things off of TrackLib or sounds.com or Splice, can you utilize those same type of things in music
Yeah,
licensing?
it's like you can, but what I do anytime I approach Splice, and I definitely recommend everybody do this if you don't do it already. When you're on Splice, use Shazam because you
Yep.
might find a sample that you like, and I've Shazammed so many samples, and it's a song pops right up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, it can just cause confusion. It can make things a little sticky and make it unnecessary, even though those they're there to help you. Um, Again, manipulate it, chop it up, get creative with it, do those things because that'll help you still. And that's kind of like the purpose of a loop or even sampling from a record. You know what I mean? You want to
Mm-hmm.
make it not necessarily indistinguishable, but have
Unique.
fun. Like, yeah, unique. Yeah, unique, and have fun with it. But again, to reiterate, just don't use a loop. A library actually asked me that early on. I had a loop, created the track. They reached out and said, "Yo, we like this track, this track, this track." I'm like, "Okay, cool." The first question was, "Do any of these tracks contain a sample from any sample pack?" So I'm like, "Oh yeah, this one does," and they had to deny the track. So that was
Mm.
me. I missed out on an opportunity, and the main reason was because that's the driving part of the track. That loop is. So that do 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 do, like that's the driving part of my
Mm-hmm.
song. When I take that out, it's kind of like, eh. So if the loop is a part of your song and you take it out, then your song kind of flops a little bit. Then it's most likely is that you shouldn't use it, but be creative with it, most definitely.
Yeah, I think that is the advice. If you're going to use construction kits, loops, be very creative with it. Don't let it stand alone by itself. I heard of I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine who he had used a loop in one of his productions, and it came back as a copyright claim. And but the copyright claim came from somebody who was not the creator of the actual construction kit. It was it was someone else, someone completely different. And I don't know if the if the construction kit creators knew that these individuals had put a copyright claim or were collecting copyrights or royalties on something that they created. But I do know the copyright claim came up on YouTube and it was flagged, and it tells you who was through. And so it was by these people, but they were not the creators or the owners of the actual construction kit. So you have to be really careful when utilizing sample packs and things like that. A friend of mine, he even put it in the chat, excuse me, a friend of mine, he said, definitely make sure you keep those agreements that come with your
With
construction kit. Yes.
Oh yeah,
because,
for sure.
Because they outline the entire usage of that kit. So you have to be very, very considerate.
So I have a funny story. It's actually a friend of mine's. I don't know if y'all know Greg Savage, but a super dope composer in TV and film. So
Yeah, man.
this is what you don't do as well. So using construction kit, somebody used a construction kit, right? So he's working in TV and film. He gets a brief. And in this brief, a lot of times, Dre and Nelson knows that you'll get sample tracks of examples of what they're looking for. So he opens up the folder and listening through the tracks. And somebody literally took a construction kit that he made and used, or it was a demo track. Took the demo track, used it just as is, then no changes, nothing.
Wow.
And they sent it to him, and he's like, "Yo, like I created this," and they just called it their own. And so that created a whole situation. They had to go and renegotiate splits and everything like that. But yeah, like don't take a construction kit and just use it as is and then call it your own, because you're gonna run into it. Like somebody's gonna find out.
You're gonna run into it.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna run. So I remember hearing a conversation with DJ Payne One, and he said that somebody had used his kit or some of his samples and sent it to him, saying, "Hey, check out my sample kit," and wanted him to purchase the sample kit and was trying to resell his kits back to him.
Wow.
It's like, wow.
And that's what another like Splice. Like Splice is a great platform, but you definitely have to be careful because you have a sample and then you took a similar sample from a completely different person, but it's the same sample. They just kind of maybe filtered it or did something to it. So you definitely have to be careful out here because I mean, I guess again, keep it short, man. Keep it short and manipulate that sample. Chop it up, reverse it, whatever. Don't
Warp
just
it,
use
something.
it. Right, something, little something.
Yes.
Or just, if you want to work around it, collaborate. You know what I mean? Collaborate with different instrument players, keyboard players, guitar players, and that helps a whole lot, versus, you down the line getting copyright infringement claims, and then it would definitely put a bad taste in supervisors and libraries' mouth where they may not work with you in the future. So you definitely got to be creative because it's happening, and the ones that are noticing it, they're the good guys. They're saying, hey, this is our track, like Clint was saying in that example, and they could be using their tracks and stuff like that, and then they're like, oh, that track, and then they formulate a relationship, and then they build, and then they start doing work for them. So you just want to make sure that all I's and T's are crossed, and you're doing good work and avoiding that stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I have a couple of questions before we move to our Q&A. So this question is, so what are some of the top mistakes that can destroy a music producer's or artist's licensing career? We'll start with Dre. and then we'll have everybody else jump in.
Format is one. I would definitely start off with that. You know, if you're not really sticking to the format guidelines and you're not really learning the process, you know, it could definitely you know, slow down, you know, the amount of assignments or briefs, if you will, that you may get. So you definitely want to learn the format and learn the process, learn terms and things like that, because it's going to help you out in the long run. But if you're not really sticking to the formula and, you know, your tracks are not within, you know, those types of specifics, you know, they're going to get denied eventually, and you don't want to do that. So if you are seeing that in the beginning, like I mean, I was in like full length transfer thinking like, oh, I'll be all right, but clearly it wasn't right. So I took the time out to kind of do, you know, some research and you know, learn from, you know, guys like Clinton Nelson and, you know, and other peers, and like, hey, you know, you got to stick to the format, make sure that you're, you know, covering your deliverables and, you know, and learning at the same time, so that when you're in your zone and you've got your templates going, you know, it makes it easier for you, you know, in the long run once you're pumping out tracks, you know, on a consistent basis.
Perfect.
Good.
Nelson or Clint?
Oh yeah. One thing I think that can destroy is definitely impatience, and it may seem something that's like minor, but I've seen and heard stories. You know, when people get impatient, you really make decisions that you probably wouldn't make. You know what I mean? For instance, giving other producers the opportunity to collaborate with you when you know what I mean? You collaborated with someone else with the same tracks, and then they get to the library, and now you have bad blood with these libraries. And because the community with sync licensing, it's big, but it's very close knit. You know, a lot of people know each other. You know what I mean? From supervisors to editors, coordinators, all the way down to composers. You know, so definitely in all that you do, especially in licensing, be patient, because the one thing that you don't want to do is give up, and you could ultimately ruin your career before you start, and you can ruin it. You can ruin it by not moving forward, you know, because you're not going to get a placement overnight. You know what I mean? So if you seek out to get a placement and then you get discouraged and you get impatient early on, you know, you might miss out on all these opportunities that could have come if you know, that you stuck with it and stay diligent. So for me, that kind of puts a damper on your, you know, on your career, because you kind of make moves that you probably shouldn't, by being impatient, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
would
Clint?
say I would say being the flake, man, and flaking out. There's been situations where, you know, deadlines are really, really short in TV and film, and you can send some music out to, you know, to say a handful of composers and say like, I need this by this deadline, and they say they'll do it, and then when that deadline comes, you don't have anything. So now you're scrambling trying to get something together, you know, to send out, and you don't want to do that, because once you show that some like that you don't keep your word and that you won't deliver by a said deadline that you said you would deliver by, people remember that, and they'll write you off as a flake, and they won't ever work with you again. And like Nelson said, it's big, but it's really small. Like word travels fast, and like
Yeah, for sure.
I've had composers reach out. It was like, yo, hey, they flake out. Don't work with them. And I just be like, okay, because nobody wants that kind of person on their team. If you're impatient, if you flake, and if you're super sensitive to where somebody says you need to change this in your music and you get all uptight, like it's not gonna work. You're not gonna last.
Yes.
That's different, you know, from being consistent and saying, hey, well, I just can't make it at this point. But yeah, you got to be on time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't do it, just say you can't do it. Like people will respect that a lot more.
Sure.
That's right.
And then you have to be also like what I call like work withable. You know what I mean? Is if you're like Clint said, like if you're the kind of person that can't take criticism or you can't take instruction well, that is really, really gonna put a damper on you, because the people who are patient enough to teach you some things and you're kind of stubborn, like, oh, I don't want to do that. I can't say that, or that's not me. You know, when you start getting that type of attitude, people will, they'll definitely write you off like, yeah, well, we tried, we don't want to work with them, but so you always want to be a great person to work with, like each time, like very easy to work with. You do that, you will definitely go far.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because I've learned, and I'm sure you guys have learned as well, and for those who are watching the live stream, the music industry is like this. It is so small, and word gets around super quick. And so, kind of to Clint's point, if you are hard to deal with, if you flake, and to Nelson's point, if you don't have that the ability to work easily with those, it gets around, because they talk. People talk.
Exactly.
Like, if you don't think people in the music industry talk to each other, trust me, they absolutely do. And word will get out.
They type.
They type.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Email travels faster too, so
Woo.
It
sure does.
Whole group email like terrible.
Hey, terrible. Hey, stay away from this person. Yeah.
He hasn't hit me back in a couple of weeks. Where is it? Like, got an email about you, buddy.
Yeah. All right, so gentlemen, so let's take a moment and let's open it up for the rest of our time for Q&A. So as we were going through the live stream, we had a couple of questions come up. So this would be a good time for those questions that you may have for those who are watching to post those so that we can get our expert panelists to answer. All right, here we go. So here's one. And whoever wants to take it can just jump in and take it.
I would say for that question, I would say definitely do a lot of reverse engineering to see maybe the producers and the showrunners for that show, but also to be honest and transparent. By the time a movie has a release date, they've probably already squared away the composers and the music for that. So not to discourage you, but maybe start looking into what they're working on next. You know what I mean? So maybe get in contact with, the person behind that film and say, hey, my intentions were to have this song for this film, but it may be already wrapped, and so I think that, again, kind of reverse engineer it, do the research on, maybe look for the editors of that film or the music coordinators, definitely the supervisors, and just reach out, and let them know. So I think that, what was it? Can you pull the question up again? I think it was it looked like a 2-part question, but we're coming. So how do I get them to consider it? Oh, okay. I think I answered it. So yeah, definitely reach out to anybody that you can involved with that film and let them know that you have the song for sure. But again, if it comes out in 2021, they're probably already done with the music, but that gives you an opportunity to maybe get in the next project that they're working on.
I think IMDb, I think they tell you which stage. So there's like different stages in movie production. You got like pre-production, production, and then post-production, and a lot of the music is synced in post-production. So if it doesn't say like any of those, then like Nelson said, it's probably already a wrap, and they're just planning on marketing and all that stuff right now.
All right, perfect. So here's the next question. So some people do use a whole song in a movie. Why? And then whoever wants to jump in. Yeah, whoever wants to take it.
Some people do you. I don't understand, like, because you got the credits and things like that. You'll hear a whole song, or like in a scene. I haven't really heard a whole lot of just like a full song used in a movie a lot. Usually it's just like a section of it.
Or if it was a performance scene or something like that,
That's true.
Right.
I mean, that's an exception, but.
Okay. All right. So here we have I guess it's a question, but it's from my guy, Vaughan. He said, I don't know if y'all can see the whole question, but it says, my partner and I tell every artist about sync licenses, the new label, because streaming sucks. Also, can you guys...
Yeah, man. I mean, music licensing for indie artists, man, is a way to it's a way to build your fan base. It's a way to monetize your music. And it, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just a dope opportunity. And I think it's best for indie artists because you can provide value to these TV shows by giving them music for a lower price than Beyonce, because we know she charging a bunch of money, right? And you know, you just put yourself in a position to be exposed to millions of people. Um, as I don't know exactly specifically what you want us to touch on as far as cues, but usually that's more so on the instrumental side of things. So yeah, I don't know if it was something specific you wanted us to touch on or not.
All right, we'll see if Steve Vaughan elaborates. So until we get that, so here's another question. So it says, how easy is it to create your own publishing company? Do you recommend and when?
Oh, that is so, Kevin. It's extremely easy. You know, pretty much whether it be BMI, ASCAP, you know, it's extremely easy. They have you walk through it, pretty straightforward. And I definitely recommend that everyone creates their own publishing company, essentially because even starting out in sync licensing, you never know where that's going to take you, and somebody's going to always have to collect the publishing. You know what I mean? So if you ultimately get into a situation and they're like, okay, so what's your, you know, they give you an agreement, you know, they have to put your publishing company, or you sign an agreement, they need to know where the publishing goes and where the writer's share goes. So I always tell everyone, definitely start a publishing company, because then again, it's you know what I mean? You're not really splitting anything with anyone. You're getting all of the you know, all of the income from your licensing opportunities. So definitely start a production company. Well, not a production company, but definitely start a publishing company for certain.
Yeah. Yeah, I would second that, and I'm sure the other guys would as well.
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. So here's a question from Antoine. It says, "Do y'all have advice for independent recording artists who want to break into the industry with this method?" And once again, whoever wants to jump in and answer. I'm not going to ask who wants to answer. It's if you want to take it, perfect.
I'll
go ahead,
take.
sorry.
Okay, no.
Yeah.
But I was just say a little bit where you know, I would definitely recommend it for independent artists, because just like what Clint was saying a few minutes ago, it's a great avenue where you can create, you know, your resume, have leverage for yourself, you know, great advertising, if you will, and promotion, because a lot of series shows on these networks like great music, not necessarily, you know, from a major artist, but if it's great music that is received very well, you know, they'll, you know, and it gets placed, you know, you might have opportunities down the line where you're doing, you know, multiple, you know, forms of music, or, you know, amounts of music for consideration for different shows, the same network, and, you know, maybe establish a relationship with the supervisor. So it's a great way, you know, for sure, for artists, you know, establish a relationship with a great producer that you've been working with, and different songwriters and things like that. And, you know, you guys can definitely take the charts, you know, as far as making, you know, making yourself into that realm, because you know, you might see more traction on your independent releases too, with your numbers going up with streaming and all of that. So yeah, I look at it as a win-win. You know, you guys may agree too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think if you're considering really focusing on the TV film side as an artist or as a songwriter, definitely be mindful of your lyrics and how you write, because certain
Hmm.
lyrics work good for TV and film. Stay away from like the super specific dates and like
Yeah.
names and cities and stuff like that, because you want your song to be able to be used in multiple situations, not just a song in LA having to do with somebody named Rob. Like, I don't know, like you know what I'm saying? Like, don't be super specific. Keep it open for interpretation, and you know, you'll find yourself, you know, having more opportunities that way.
Yeah, and it's definitely a good time for, you know, for this whole thing. Someone mentioned in their question, kind of like, the new label, and I always call music supervisors like the new A&R, because if without realizing that they break a lot of songs and the show. But before Meg the Stallion, before she had actually Blue, she had a song on a TV show. So that kind of stuff helps propel people because they Shazam like, oh, I like this song. Like who is this? And like Dre said, that can help you with your other music. So definitely write music that can be universal, as Clint said, because that'll give you a lot of opportunities. And A&Rs, A&Rs and TV shows ultimately break records and break artists for certain.
Yep. And make sure your social medias and stuff, make sure you look like a legit artist.
Yeah.
Because I think Nelson mentioned it
They
before.
visit
Like
those
they go to
things.
those social media sites and your Instagram. Like if you just got random stuff like just on your Instagram and you don't look like you take this serious, they're gonna be less likely to give you opportunity. Because like literally people don't
Right.
understand, they want to give you an opportunity. They want to break
That's
artists.
their job,
Yeah.
So,
They're taking the time out their schedule to work on that stuff for you. So definitely look like you have that presence for sure, at least.
and learn the business as much as you can. There's like so many resources and so many people who have tips and who are willing to show you. Just open your mind as an artist to actually learn the business side too. Don't just be an artist, be an artist and then be a business entity as well, because when the opportunity comes up, the opportunity comes fast and it will go away just as fast if you're not prepared. So
Yep.
keep that in mind too.
All right, appreciate that. Okay, so here's our next question. Are there specific genres that are more licensed than others, or specific libraries for certain genres?
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, I think that there's libraries for everything. I always tell people to like just Google whatever genre you do and then add music library in the beginning or at the end of it, and just search for, sometimes you gotta do the groundwork and really search for the companies that your music would fit well with, and not just sending stuff off to multiple just random people that have nothing to do with your genre of music. The most popular genres, I just feel like it's, if you go to the Billboard charts and see what's chart topping, a lot of times those mid tempo, up tempo stuff, hip hop, trap, EDM, stuff like that. I feel like it gets placed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak on piggyback on Clint a little bit, make sure you research the library, because you will find that. And kind of going back a little bit, that'll kind of burn your relationships too. If you're trying to submit country music to a library that focuses on hip hop, something like that, that'll kind of hurt in the long run, because that's not really what they're looking for. But
All right.
yeah, I just wanted to add that little tidbit on there. So
Yeah, perfect. All right, next question. I'm gonna try to make sure we try to get to as many questions as possible before our time is up. Okay, so here we go. So what are some good VST libraries beginners should invest in for sync licensing? Omnisphere.
Or VST plugins. Yeah, there you go.
Omnisphere and Complete.
Yeah, complete.
Complete. If you don't have complete contact,
Yeah.
there's a plethora out there. And just
Yeah.
something that you've been do some research. You might find some plugins, just doing some research online, or in the store, or just recommendations from peers or producers. See what's out there, because I've heard a lot about Omnisphere. I don't have it personally, but to the ones that do, I know it's phenomenal. It's on my wish list for the holidays, but I'll get it on my hands. But Contact has been definitely resourceful for me. I like Initial Audio plugins. Pigment, is definitely nice by Arteria. I mean, there's so many. The more creative you can be, you never know what definitely would be your outcome. So stuff that
like,
sounds good.
yep, yeah, right. And like Complete, like you mentioned, is good. Omnisphere. One that I like that a lot of people probably hate is like Silent. I don't know. I really like Silent, like a bunch, because it kind of like allows me to be a little creative with the sounds and manipulate sounds and things like that and design my own. So for me, I like silent with a combination of like omnisphere and complete. So those are good. My recommendations, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say if you get complete, I mean, if you get complete,
game, I mean, you can't go wrong
if you get
as a
complete,
start out.
Right.
you're complete. No,
Right.
Get those, those offers, for the upgrades, so you can't
Hey.
go wrong with discount stuff.
That's right, because complete has so many different sounds and so many different libraries and so many different instruments. I guess my only advice, if I can give some advice, would be to stay away from ones that I know my good friend just mentioned it. There are free ones that are out there too, but stay away from ones that don't have quality sounds in them.
Yep.
Right? Because you can find a gazillion VSTs, but if the sounds aren't quality, then yeah, so try to stay away from those if the sounds aren't quality. That's why we kind of mention things like Atmosphere, Incomplete, and Silent, and Serum, and things like that, because they have really good sounds in those particular instruments. All right, next question. Can you explain the narrative part of the track structure? So we kind of have someone take that. Yeah.
So the narrative is a good way to explain it is just a slimmed down version of the track. So for instance, if you have a track and the main you have a piano and maybe a synth melody or something like that. So the narrative version is just I would probably, to create my narrative version, I would probably take out that lead melody, the lead synth melody, right? So that's really what the narrative version means. Whatever is kind of driving that track, just simply remove it. It might be a melody or whatever on top. Just kind of remove it, and that is how I kind of go about creating a narrative track, I think.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the question that I just said. So the question came up: how do we define good quality, right? And so I guess my response would be to that: if it doesn't sound like it's generic, I guess I would say if it's not generic sounding, if it doesn't sound bland, if it doesn't sound
thin.
I won't even
Thin.
thin.
Yeah.
If it sounds full.
And sometimes you won't know starting out. That's where that constructive criticism comes in, because you'll submit a track and they'll be like, sometimes they don't explain it well, but they'll kind of hint at sounding thin or cheesy or just
like dated,
too basic.
Dated
is a good one.
Because you can make a track and it sounds good, but the kicks or the snares that you use or the melody or the plugin that you use is you probably had that since like 2002 or something, you know what I mean? Right. So they can hear that. Mm-hmm. Like Clint mentioned, they're looking at stuff that's like current. So whatever they're using to probably produce their tracks, that's kind of what we should kind of keep up with if we can to use to kind of increase the better quality.
Right. Yep. Perfect. Okay, next question. Do any of the panelists have a music library?
So, well, I do have a music library. It's not, maybe soon, guys, it'll be public, but I do have a music library, and it just led me to start that. But I think eventually, as you grow, you ultimately will start a library. But I would say keep an eye out. You'll follow us all, I'm pretty sure, on social media. But for me, like I do own a music library, yes.
See, look at that. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so it says, do you recommend we register our instrumentals with our PRO before sending them out, or is it that necessary?
I don't think so. No.
Because a lot of times once you get signed, they'll do it for you. To the music library and stuff, so you don't really have to worry too much about that.
So I don't have to be worried about that they're going to take the song and I don't get any type of royalties and anything like that if it's
But the
not,
back
with the
point of
PR.
that is that you want to make sure that they have it registered too. And sometimes things happen with the vocal tracks that are being submitted from a bunch of composers, and they may have dropped the ball on that one, but you definitely want to make sure it's registered after it's gotten approved within time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it's
Yeah.
not registered, you can't get your property. So
That's right.
And it's all about being organized too. Like maybe make a spreadsheet or something, and like I think Dre mentioned early on, make sure you know who you're sending your music to. And there's ways to track your music and things like that. So make sure you do your due diligence and stay organized, because there are so many composers, and if they drop the ball, like, you will probably never really know. But it's always good to ask, like, hey, did you register all 10 of these tracks? You know what I mean? And check your pro periodically to make sure each of those tracks are registered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm
the admin type for you.
right. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the to this question again, just so that we can get the last part of it. I think I skipped over the last part, and then we'll look at one more, and because I know we're gonna run out of time here soon, and then we'll close it out. Sorry, we weren't able to get to every question. So it says, do any of the panelists have a music library? So yes. Can we split the royalties and leverage their standing relationships? So I guess that's going to be back for.
So, like, can we split the royalties? And I'm not necessarily sure, like, what that last part kind of means. Can you pull it back up again?
Yeah, I sure can.
So I have music, like, can we split the royalties and leverage? Are you asking the person who owns the library this question?
I think so.
Because,
yeah, I think so.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess just to kind of elaborate, I do have a library. It's not necessarily public right now, so I guess the answer to that question would be no. Unfortunately, not at this moment. I think that's the answer to that question, if I'm understanding it correctly.
And then if you sign with the library, they will take usually the publishing side of the royalties, and then you keep your writer's share. If that makes sense. So it's usually kind of like a 50-50 kind of deal. Yeah.
And when you work your way on up with supervisors and more direct relationships, then you can kind of reach out for the negotiation part, on the pub and the writer's side. But that's a more direct call right there.
Yeah. All right. So, like I said, I'm sorry we weren't able to get to every single question. I do want to make sure I stay timely with our panelists' time as well. But thank you once again, everybody, for having the ability to tune in to the conversation on sync licensing. Thank you very much to our panelists today. So I greatly appreciate you three gentlemen taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and expertise with me too, right?
No problem.
Because I'm always picking your brain. What about this? What about this? So I greatly appreciated you taking the time to share your knowledge with everyone who tuned in this evening. So before we close out, there's two things that I want to mention. So two of our panelists, Nelson and Clint, have been gracious enough to provide us with prizes, right? So several of you who are watching today will be receiving either one or two prizes that will come from Nelson and come from Clint. These are going to be randomly selected, and you will receive an email to claim your prize for being a participant today. So I want to thank you once again, Nelson and Clint, for providing that. It is Clint's Road to 10 Placement, and it is Nelson's Starter Guide to Sync Licensing. I think I got that right, Clint?
Yeah.
Nelson.
Quick start guide, music licensing start guide.
That's right. And so those resources are going to help you in answering some of the questions you may have here today as well, and to help further your career in this particular field. So before we exit, I guess there's another thing I want to ask. Make sure to subscribe if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel. We have tons of content. We are going to be doing this conversation every single month. So the one that we're going to do next month is on music production. So make sure that you tune in. I know I have some questions in here about specifically to music production. So make sure to attend that one. It'll be October 22nd, same time, same channel as well. So before we end, final words from each of our panelists. So we'll start with Clint.
So be patient in this process. Don't give up. Don't look for instant results. Don't look for royalties to start rolling in right away after you sent 2 tracks out. Like, just stay consistent.
Yeah.
Keep putting out as much music as you can. And before you know it, things will start adding up, and you'll start to build more and more relationships. So yeah, just stick with it.
All right, thanks. Nelson.
Yep. So my last words again, like Clint said, definitely be patient. And if you aren't in the sync game already and you're definitely looking to get into it, change your mindset. You know what I mean? Change your mindset to be positive and, again, patient and willing to learn and expand your knowledge, because that's definitely going to take you a long way. And like I said, I'm always trying to stay positive. So you just go into this, keep God first and keep your eye on a prize, and you'll definitely win every single time.
Yeah, and just to relay to the gentleman as well, be positive, patient, remain consistent, and network as much as possible, and keep God first, and things will definitely start rolling. But be consistent and be professional as well, because your first impression, make it the best one if you can. You know what I mean? And it's definitely not an overnight process. Tracks that you made now and submit again approved, they might not get a placement that year, but they can in the next year and a half, almost 2 years. So just stay encouraged, and everything will lead.
And do not throw away beats. Don't do that. Don't throw away.
Exactly.
And no throwaway beats. Keep them, because you never know. I mean, because you never know. You may have created something a year ago that you go back to and you're like, oh, I'm gonna do something with this, and it may get picked up. So no throwaway beats. Okay, so real quick, Clint, where can people find you?
ClintProductions.com is the website. I'm on Instagram a lot at Clint Music. So yeah, those are the two major spots to find me.
For me, it's Nelson. Yeah, for me, it's NelsonKJohnson.com, and I can be found on Instagram at 85 Productions LLC. You spell it out all the way. So that's how you can find me there.
Yeah, and also for me, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Dre Phantom, how it's spelled on the screen right now, at DREPHANTOM. And, feel free to drop a line.
Perfect. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, you can find us at We Create Music TV. You can also visit our website, www.wecreatemusic.tv, for additional episodes, interviews, master classes, a whole bunch of content that we have currently and we have planned for the future. So once again, make sure to subscribe so that you can stay locked in with We Create Music TV. And as soon as this information comes out for the next conversation, make sure to tune in as well. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am Vaughan. I am the creator and host of We Create Music TV. And thank you for tuning in. Y'all have a great evening.
All right, thanks everybody. Catch y'all later.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Oh man, gentlemen, you guys are welcome. No, thank you. I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
I catch y'all later. All right, peace.
All right.